Hello, tiny friends. Welcome back to Tiny Keyhole Minis. I'm Jolene. Today's project is one of my favorite projects. I originally posted this project about 2 years ago, and I was so brand new to all the editing and filming and audio. I decided to take it down and repost a new version of this project. The original video of this project had a copyright on it. There wasn't much that I can do with the footage, but I did make a few cuts. So if you've seen this video in the past, feel free to totally skip out on it. I promise you I won't mind. Or you can choose to watch the new version. I think I posted this video before I had 1,000 subscribers, and today there are so many more of you tiny friends out there. And for those of you that may have not seen this video, because it was kind of towards the bottom of the barrel, I just wanted to reshare it. So I hope you all enjoy today's project. I wanted to challenge myself to create some sort of instrument using mainly paper products. The first thing I needed to do was to break down this instrument into all its individual pieces and parts. The best way to do that is to pull up some diagrams of the instrument or the miniature piece that you're trying to create. It's going to break it down into all its individual parts, naming each one so that you know what you're working on and what part is what. I've never played this instrument before, so the diagrams were very educational, breaking each piece down and helping me learn its individual parts. And the breakdown was extremely important for the process to be able to accurately and successfully reconstruct this piece in miniature form. I used my Cricut machine for this, and in the design program, I was able to pull up a basic graphic of the instrument, and then I was able to cut the pieces apart. So I'm basically now using different shapes to construct this instrument. I had the machine cut out several different pieces of each individual part, and for the body, I'm going to be using chipboard. For the other pieces, I'm going to be using cardstock and some plain paper, and using what I have to finish this up with all of its fine details. Since I didn't know how many pieces I would need for the body, I began with 8 pieces, and I just started gluing 2 pieces together at a time. I'm using tacky glue for this, and I got down to 4 pieces with 2 layers each, and I just built it up from there. That seemed to be enough, and I went ahead and painted it black. I'm going to give it a second coat so that I can get a nice dark black. The black will show through and give the F holes more depth when I add the face plate. And this is what it looks like. So now I can go ahead and add the trimming around the sides, which is called the rib. I'm going to use 2 strips of scrap paper, and I believe this paper came from a calendar. Adding the first strip, I'm just using tacky glue, and I want to take my time with this. So I'm going to do small sections at a time so that I can carefully get this paper into every curve and nook that it needs to fit into. So it's nicely secure and tight all the way around. Now I'm going to go ahead and double it up by adding another strip. Using the paintbrush really helps to smooth down that glue and give it a nice even layer. Next, I'm going to use my Gorilla Wood Glue to help build the shape of this fiddle so it's not so flat. This is going to help make it look more realistic and give it more of a 3D form. I love using wood glue to shape and build my pieces. It's just a great product to use. It's almost like an icing, but I'm making sure that I'm putting a very generous amount for the first layer. I'm also dragging the glue all the way to the very edge. I want to make sure that there isn't any flat surface showing right around the edges that could easily be overlooked, but very noticeable in the finished look. I want there to be more of a smooth transition from the rib side to the front and back side. So before putting it aside to dry, I'll look over it very carefully to make sure that it's all filled in. And this is pretty fun to do because it is kind of like icing. It's not too thin, it's not too thick, it's still pliable. You can move it around, and it gives you lots of time to go ahead and fill in where you need to. Okay, so it's almost completely dry. It's dried enough to go ahead and build again. And it kind of reminds me of a piece of butterscotch candy. Now, there are some bubbles in it, and that's okay if they're underneath the surface. But I do feel one that has made its way to the surface. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a thin layer. This will help fill in that open bubble and just give it a nice smooth finish. Now, this layer is not as thick. I don't need as much, but it will help add more form and shape to the body. Originally, I came up with this idea because I had a song stuck in my head. It was the Charlie Daniels Devil Went Down to Georgia. And I felt like if I created this fiddle, I could get that song out of my head and trap it inside the fiddle. I'm going to go ahead and kind of create a border around the edge so the glue will know where to stop when I fill in the middle section. Just like when you're icing cookies with royal icing, which I've only ever done one time, but it was fun. Okay, so it's almost completely dried. It has a nice shape. It's nice and smooth. I'm going to let it finish drying completely and come back to it in a little bit. I'm going to move on. I'm going to cut the tops off of these shapes because I'll be making realistic ones later on. And I'm going to double these pieces up as well. And I'm going to use the same shapes for both the fingerboard and the neck. So for the fingerboard, I'm just going to paint it black. And for the neck, I'm going to use a combination of white acrylic paint and cinnamon. Okay, these pieces are dried, and I'm just going to lay the fingerboard on top of the neck. The neck will be placed right on top in the middle over the seam. I am going to add a piece to the back of the neck on the bottom to give it more of an accurate look, and it will give it more support. But they will be installed this way. Right now, I'm just going to mark where I need the fingerboard to line up, and I'm going to glue it down into place. I just need to make some adjustments, so I'm going to slide it down just a little more. Okay, moving on to the tailpiece. These things are so tiny, and a little difficult to handle. But I'm not in the habit of using tweezers, so of course I'm going to make it more complicated for myself. I layered several pieces together until I was happy with the width, and I used a little paintbrush to kind of curve it and give it a little bit of a curved shape. And now I'm just going to paint it black. For the strings, I'm using jewelry wire, and I am using this scrap piece of scalloped trimming that I used a while back for my little antique trays. I've cut a few pieces and glued them together to create the bridge. And I'm not sure if you can see this, but I kind of slit the middle to have some sort of opening where I can slide the wires in. I'm using a piece of masking tape to hold the wires still so that I can arrange them and lay them down in place. I'm going to fold the masking tape over just to keep them put. And now I can go ahead and slide them into the tail and glue them into place. I'm going to add a couple caviar beads on the tail because there's a tuner knob on the tail, and I'm also just adding a couple extra for added detail. Moving on to the chin rest, I'm going to use a couple of these cutout pieces as kind of like a guide and actually a template. So I'm going to draw the chin rest right on this piece, and then I'll be able to cut it out. The piece that I'm cutting out now, I'll use for a template. I'm going to create the chin rest out of this scrap piece of craft paper. I previously painted it with a mixture of black acrylic and Mod Podge to give it a faux leather look. So once I get the shape that I like and the size that I want, I'm just going to curve the front of it, kind of give it like a curved shape, and that'll be the chin rest. To create the scroll, I used a question mark shape in my design program and a circle. I used the circle to cut a piece from the bottom so that the bottom of the question mark has kind of like a curved bottom. I'm going to just layer these pieces together like I did previously, and I'm going to need 2 full pieces, 1 for each side. Next, I'm going to poke 2 holes in each side. This is where I'll place the pegs later on, but I'm just using a sewing pin for this. I'm going to go ahead and trim off a little bit of the neck piece because it's a bit too long. I'm going to add a little bit of tacky glue to each piece. These pieces will get glued onto each side of the neck piece. What I've done was glue them into place and then pinched the 2 top pieces together to close it. Okay, to close the back side of the scroll, because it's opened and doesn't really look like one solid piece, I'm going to use one of these cutouts I used for the neck and fingerboard. I'm trimming off the pegs, and I'm just going to glue it down from the front and wrap it all the way down to the back, trimming the excess off. This will close it up and help it look like one solid piece. Okay, this next step was mostly out of frame, and I'm really sorry about that. So I try to zoom it in a little bit so you can see a little better. I'm just adding a layer of wood glue on that strip that I added to the scroll to help it look a little more realistic. This will add a little more bulk and give it a more accurate shape. Once the glue is dry, I use the needle file just to file around the edges and sides of these two pieces. Okay, doesn't look very much like a scroll yet. It still looks pretty flat, so I'm going to give it its final details. I'm using these wooden rounds and I've cut them very thinly. I believe I cut a toothpick for this. And I'm going to use some round cutouts of chipboard. I'm just going to layer them together on each side. Okay, now it looks more like a scroll and I can continue painting it. I'm going to give it a base layer of folk art cinnamon. I absolutely love using this color as a base color. Once this is dry, I'm going to go over it with some antique wax by Waverly. That cinnamon will help the antique wax have a golden finish to it in the end. Okay, now it's time to make the pegs. And I'm using these oval cutout pieces, and this is just chipboard. I'm going to cut them in half. I'm also using sewing pins, and I've cut the sewing pins down, and I'm just going to sandwich the sewing pins in between the two pieces. And then I'll cut the sewing pins down a little later. I've given them a coat of black sequins by Folk Art. Okay, I filled in the front of the fiddle with the glue and then I painted it. And I added a little more glue to the F-holes. So I need to file them down so it's nice and smooth. Now, this isn't going to look very pretty. Matter of fact, it's going to look like some sort of plant disease. But in the end, it's going to have a nice smooth finish and it's going to look really good after I paint it. So I'm doing the same step as I did with the scroll. A base layer of the cinnamon by Folk Art, and then I'm going over it with some antique wax by Waverly. The antique wax helps to give it more of a natural wood look. Depending on how you apply the antique wax, you can apply the antique wax leaving brush strokes to help it look like there's wood grain. Okay, I'm moving on to the bow, and I'm using a toothpick for the stick. I've already stained it, and I've got some cutout shapes. One's going to be for the frog, which will be at one end of the bow, and the other one will be the tip. And just like the other pieces, I'm going to layer a few of these together until I get the width that I need. For the tip, I used a bow tie shape and I just kind of folded it over the end of the toothpick. And now I'm going to give it a layer of wood glue to make it look like one solid piece. For the frog, I've glued it onto the side of the other end and I'm just painting it with a black sequence. I've added a silver dot on each side of the frog for the eyelet. I've cut a very skinny strip of that faux leather paper I created, and I am using it for the finger grip. I've painted the tip with a silver chrome, and now I'm going to add the hair string. For the string, I've taken apart a piece of hemp cord and scaled it down to one strand, and I'm gluing it to the inside of the frog. I'm going to use this pin to kind of flatten it down so that it's nicely glued and stays put. For the other end, it's just going to be glued right here on the tip. Later on, I'll use a piece of silver chrome card as kind of like a metal plate. Okay, all my parts are completed, and now it's time to assemble the fiddle. Okay, to give it a final finish look, I'm going to give both pieces a coat of this clear enamel gloss by Folk Art. Okay, tiny friends, here is a final look at both pieces. I hope you've enjoyed this project today, and if you have, please hit that like button and give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to let me know what you thought about this project in the comments below. And if you know somebody that you think may like this miniature creation as well, then please share it with your tiny friends. If this is your first time visiting TinyKeyHoleMinis and would like to see more of my miniature creations, please hit that subscribe button and don't forget to hit that top bell notification button to be notified every time I upload a new project so you don't miss out. And if you've watched this video in the past and stuck around to watch the new version, I hope you've enjoyed it, and thank you so much for watching. As always, I like to thank everybody for watching and welcome all my new subscribers. Thank you all so much for your support. I'm really trying to get creative with the content that I already have so that I can have something to share with you all. I know some of you are waiting for my return and to see what I have in store for new miniature creations. I'll be back soon, I promise. So until the next time, tiny friends, I hope you all have a lovely day, and I will see you all on the mini side. Bye-bye.